Welcome to Not the Top 20 podcast, where in the Championship, Pompey play up and trip up Leeds, whose lead has vanished as Blades fend off North End and Burnley eat the Hatters. Cov's fire is stoked by yet another late win. The returning Robins potters home with nothing. In League One, Bolton skewer Brewers to hit the top six. Huddersfield fluff it and puff goes Mike Duff's somewhat rough tenure. Tough scene. In League Two, Wimbledon the only winners in the top seven. Grim for Walsall, far from it for Grimsby. And here's a tester. Could Colchester pester the playoffs in this final EFL trimester? All that and more in Not the Top 20's Monday pod. He's George Elek. I'm Ali Maxwell. George, the weekend in the Championship was dramatic as hell. And I think it always is to an extent, but I think that once March comes around and once the days get longer and once the sun is more prominent when you're watching games, it's got a different feel to it. And part of that feeling is a dramatic feeling. And this was a dramatic weekend in the Championship, particularly down on the south coast in Portsmouth, particularly in the Midlands area in Coventry. We got some major talking points, and we'll start at the top because Burnley beat Luton 4-0, loads to get at. Sheff United beat Preston by 1-0. And then on Sunday, Portsmouth beat Leeds by 1-0 at Fratton Park. What it means is that Sheffield United draw level on points with Leeds. Remember, that means they've actually picked up 2 more points on the pitch this season, but had the 2-point deduction. And Burnley are 2 points back, looking stronger and stronger in attack, most notably. That's where we should start, I think, George, at Turf Moor, where these two teams came down from the Premier League. They met on opening weekend, and Burnley stuck 4 past Luton at Kenilworth Road. I mean, can you remember opening day? Can you remember what we felt about these two teams then? Because, wow, how about this?
Yeah, this was domination, really, from Burnley. And, you know, in no part, well, massively aided by the fact that before there was a single shot in the game, it was 11v10. The first 23 minutes of this game passed without a single effort on goal from either side. Which maybe isn't that surprising given Burnley's incredible defensive record, Luton's very poor attacking form, and Burnley generally not being the most relentless attacking side. But after 90 minutes, Callum Smith was sent off for 2 yellow cards, both of which were totally fair. He did his best to look perplexed by the second decision, but it was very obviously a yellow card, and the fact that he kind of retreated very quickly with his head almost on the grass, bowed down so low, suggested he knew what was coming. And that was obviously the moment where the game changed, because here you've got arguably the worst team in the whole league in Luton away at one of the best teams in the league who are playing very well in Burnley. And when that becomes 11v10, there was only one way this was going to go. The fact that it was Mark McGuinness who came on to replace the centre-off Callum Smith, who then scored the own goal, was unfortunate for him. Often with those kind of own goals, I think you can understand why the defender's done it. There's a player behind him. If he doesn't have a go, it's going to go to that player and he's going to score anyway. But there wasn't anyone behind McGuinness. From what I could tell, it was a ball that was destined just to run across the face of goal. But he still managed to divert it in. Lyle Foster scored the second late in the first half before Brownhill. And then very late on, some great scenes with Ashley Barnes scoring and kind of it being crowned like the day of Ashley Barnes.
I've never seen a celebration in a regulation league match looks so like a testimonial where the guy hasn't scored for 90 minutes in his own testimonial, like Tony Hibbert style, then gets given a pen at the end.
Yeah, exactly. And I like Ashley Barnes saying in his post-match interview that he'd given his life to Burnley, which I thought was a lovely touch for a guy that played quite a lot of football for Brighton, for other teams. But no, great scenes either way. Marcus Edwards, yet again, absolutely superb on the right-hand side. Just a ball carrier whose ability is way above the level, and he shouldn't be playing Championship football. That's becoming very, very obvious. And his arrival at Burnley does seem to have triggered an improvement from them. You know, Matt Bloomfield said after the game that he was proud of his players. You can understand why, I guess. You know, they, regardless of the scoreline and the fact they weren't very good, they competed for the 90 minutes, having been down to 10 men, and what was a thankless task. And Jacob Brown had a couple of chances in the second half to get them on the score sheet, but didn't take them. It's desperate for Luton now. That win against Pompey feels like a long time ago already. It wasn't a particularly convincing performance that day, and they offered very little here, even when it was 11v11. So for them, I am just I've been concerned for a long time, but I can't still really see a way out for them, given the gap between them and the teams they're trying to chase down. For Burnley, this is another really big win, and I kind of feel like Burnley right now are playing as well as they have done all season, and that's dangerous for both Sheffield United and for Leeds.
Yeah, certainly going forward, isn't it? And we can't ignore, and we aren't ignoring, sparkly Marcus Edwards, who's just adding so much to their team, and not just in what he can do on the ball on his own, but also the fact that when he receives the ball, it's normally necessary to send a second defender over to try and stop him doing whatever he wants on it, which opens up space for his teammates. And the likes of Brownhill and Anthony are really benefiting from that. So Burnley's clean sheet record, which still stood last Monday, now stands at 1, because they did concede in the week against Cardiff. Josef Salek basically, it was like prime Ibrahimovic against Burnley in midweek, scoring 1 and hitting the woodwork twice. Still winning that game as well means their streak of runs is very impressive at the moment. Sheff United, you could say the same about them. 6 wins in their last 7, with just the defeat to Leeds in there. 9 wins in their last 11, setting an excellent pace, just like Leeds, just like Burnley, which is giving us a hell of a promotion, an automatic promotion race to cover, I think, over the next 2 months or so. A couple of early chances for Tyrese Campbell that he didn't take, but showing nice movement, showing that he doesn't love shooting with his right foot, for one chance in particular. Thought Preston may have had a penalty in the first half, not given, and then the sliding doors moment in the second, where Sam Greenwood, on a rare foray forward for Preston, hits the post from the edge of the box, and within a minute, Sheff United are ahead. Campbell heading home a Burrows cross. It's those sorts of things that make it seem predestined that Sheff United are going to win promotion, because the frustration that I'm sensing from Leeds United fans, from Burnley fans, whenever they're looking at Sheffield United's games and they're thinking, how are you just consistently winning these football matches? There's an intangible quality to Sheff United that they've shown in edging so many games where they maybe haven't looked as dominant as you might expect a Championship top 2 candidate to look. And, we've said all season, really, maybe at some point they'll experience the other side of the coin, and some of these performances won't translate into single goal victories, but we've been saying that for 6 months now. Sidney Peck had another lovely game in midfield. So fun watching his development this season. And I think fun's the right word. He's a really fun player to watch, Peck. All action, really technical, wants to play forward, good passing range, very energetic, very competitive as well. To have him and Arblaster in your squad is pretty astonishing, really, to have 2 central midfield players of this profile, of this age, is incredible, really, for Sheff United. And obviously, it's Arblaster's injury that's really provided Peck with the platform to show what he can do. And then Leeds had to watch their 2 key rivals win on Saturday. They travelled to Portsmouth on Sunday, and Portsmouth is possibly the tough place to go in the Championship right now. Because the football cliche, tough place to go, it can't apply to like a top team in the division. It never gets used for like Man City or Arsenal, really. It doesn't.
Although they are literally
the toughest, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't apply. You can't say Ellen Road. You could say Ellen Road is a tough place to go, or Bramall Lane, but it wouldn't be fitting the true vibe that phrase is getting across. I think Portsmouth, Fratton Park right now is the tough place to go, and that's absolutely how it turned out for Leeds. What a game this was, by the way. Such fun to watch.
For sure, and to kind of add some substance to the bone on the tough place to go line. Like if you look at Pompey's home record this season against teams in the top 10, they've lost 2 games of those, but both of those were the first 2 teams that they played in the current top 10. They lost to Sunderland at home on the 31st of August 3-1. They lost to Baggies 2 weeks later on September the 15th 3-0. Since then, they've drawn 0-0 against Sheffield United and 0-0 against Sheffield United and Burnley. They've beaten Leeds. They've beaten Coventry 4-1. They've beaten Bristol City 3-0. They've beaten Middlesbrough 2-1. And they've drawn with Norwich 0-0.
It's a graveyard out there. It's a graveyard.
It really is.
In the dockyard. Also, can I just say quickly, George, that was some succulent substance that you just added to the bone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But I'm going to talk about bones and substance again in a second, weirdly. And it's not even related. But it's it's in a way, this is one of those games where for Leeds fans, all they see is we've gone away to a Portsmouth side who, needed to win in order to ensure that they're not going to get relegated, and we got beat, and that is a disaster. But I really don't think, and I'm slightly after timing here. I didn't say anything to you at the time, so it is annoying because it's proper after timing. But on the betting show, you put up Leeds to 0, and I did think, I was like Pompey at home are just a completely different beast, effectively. Like Pompey at home are a genuine top half side, probably even better than that when you consider how comfortably they beat some of the poorer teams in the league. And therefore, there is an angle here that this result isn't as disastrous as I guess Leeds fans may think it is. And when you also factor in the performance itself, and this is what I think is interesting about this, is that realistically, we can praise Pompey all we like, but on balance of play, they should have been behind by the time Colby Bishop scores. It is a brilliant goal, an unbelievable ball, like the only place the ball could have split the defence. Bishop showing some pace I didn't really know he had. And then with a finish I didn't really know he had in the far corner. Meslier should probably be a bit more commanding and come out and deal with it, possibly. Yes, and then Colby Bishop did the Andy Murray, the double Andy Murray, and showed us both biceps. But before that, Leeds should have had an absolutely blatant penalty. Are you not
allowed
Dan James's
volley someone inside the box?
You can't volley someone's leg. There were two of the worst penalty decisions I've ever seen this weekend. That one, and then also, as we'll get on to, Ephraim Mason-Clark just being like completely kiboshed by Johansson, and for some reason not being given a penalty. And then Joel Peru, who is, he has his detractors, but over time is one of the most clinical finishers in Championship football and has been in recent history. With two very good chances, the first of which he doesn't do too much wrong. Schmidt makes a decent save. The second of which is kind of unforgivable, where he blazes the ball over the bar from close range with the goal gaping. And Schmidt makes those big saves at 1-0. There is nothing in Leeds' performance on Sunday to suggest that they're falling apart or that they are dropping off. It's just one of those games where they couldn't put their chances away. They've come up against a keeper inspired and they've conceded to a good goal. But you have to give Pompey credit, because most games we see Leeds win, they would win, 95 times out of 100. They are so dominant. Whereas, as John Mousinho said in his post-match interview, because they took the game to Leeds and because they managed to create some, it didn't amount to much in terms of XG, but some good attacking moments. Dazelle forced a good save from Meslier. Murphy hit the woodwork at 1-0. Because they took the game to Leeds, it probably brings that 95 out of 100 down to 75 out of 100, where normally on the balance of play, they will lose that game more often than they won't. But because they took it to Leeds and offered something from an attacking perspective, which we see so many teams struggle to do, it tipped the balance in their favour. And they lived on the edge. As I say, they probably conceded much more in terms of good chances than they would have done had they looked to contain Leeds. But because they've got a very good keeper who made some good saves, they were able to get the 3 points. It's a massive win for Pompey in terms of continuing their good home form and showing how good they are. Murphy, again, watching that game, I was kind of thinking, imagine if Josh Murphy played for Leeds, what he would do down the left-hand side for them. He's just so good. And when he's oozing confidence, there really aren't many better than him in the Championship. But this just blows the title race wide open, regardless of what I made of Leeds' performance, where, here we go, back to the bone and the substance. But it's a bit like, if you're cooking your roast chicken on a Sunday and the timer goes off, you get the chicken out, you stick a fork in it, juices are clear, you're like, perfect, this is done. You take it out, you start carving it, and you're like, whoa, no, sorry, I got it wrong, it's going back in the oven. The championship is back in the oven, I'm afraid, even though some of us said it was done.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's so fun to watch when a team is in the sort of shape that Portsmouth are in at the moment, when they're achieving what they set out to do and went through some tough and challenging circumstances to do so. Remember the first 2 months of the season where every Monday we were like, so Portsmouth, yeah, they haven't won yet. I wonder if they ever will. And that fixture list was brutal, and we wondered, the benefits or even the drawbacks of having such a tough fixture list. And you've got to be brave and you've got to grit your teeth because it is a long season. But in September, you're not thinking it's a long season. You're thinking, when are we going to win a football match? We're losing pace already. And now here we are, and everything's fine and dandy. And the love and the pride that the fans have in the team and the manager at the moment is really special. It doesn't happen all the time. Only a couple of clubs across the country, and most of them are going to be promotion candidates rather than teams battling to stay up. I like it especially because they're the only team in the bottom 10 in the Championship not to have sacked their manager this season, not to have rolled the dice, not to have given up on the manager that they had previously thought was a good thing. And Mousinho just gets better and better, seemingly, which is super exciting as well, both for Portsmouth and for English football overall, I think. Kieran on the squad made a good point. I think it's a good day to mention this as well. He said, something to remember on days like this is that 15 years ago, Portsmouth FC were going to go bust. Fans sold nearly everything they owned to keep their club alive. And just over 10 years ago, they were towards the bottom of League Two. It took a lot of trust from the Pompey Supporters Trust to hand over the keys to the Eisner family and to Andy Cullen. They've repaid that trust and more. And that is absolutely a good place to finish. Portsmouth 1, Leeds 0. Sheff United now locked level on points with Leeds. Burnley 2 points back, all of them playing in midweek. We will have an episode of Under the Lights, which is our podcast for paid subscribers of NTT20.com. It's kind of Monday style recap of the midweek games, and they are getting more and more important. So do sign up to NTT20.com if you'd like to hear Under the Lights this week, and who knows where the twists and the turns will come from. Beneath these teams, we had a win for Sunderland, 2-1 at home to Cardiff. Not overly convincing, but they got the job done. And some positives, a really sharp take from Mayenda, who kept his place, having scored twice against Sheffield Wednesday the weekend before. And his continued confidence, or growth in confidence, bodes really well for Sunderland if it is indeed the playoffs that they're heading into, which looks, almost nailed on at this point. They did give away a goal, Isaac Davies equalising at the back post for Cardiff, and Patterson, who'd been he'd taken a bit of a hit in the build-up to that goal. I think it's debatable whether it's a foul or not, both going for the ball, but he would have wanted a foul. He'd have been a bit shaken up. It's not the last time, it's not the first time over the last few weeks that a goal's gone in and you're asking questions about Patterson. He's the story. But he made a big save at 1-1. Salek, as mentioned, looking dangerous for Cardiff. Teams are finding it really difficult to keep him at bay at the moment. Having scored against Burnley midweek, hitting the woodwork twice. He then had a chance here that Patterson saved really well, pushed it onto the post. As an aside, Salek looks really exciting. That's now 4 goals for him since joining, plus 2 off the woodwork, and this one pushed onto it too. And just when Sunderland looked like they might be running out of steam, might be thinking, having lost a little bit of that automatic promotion motivation, maybe they're going to start coasting a little between now and the end of the season. They did get the winning goal. Clever play from a set piece. Hume slipping in. Isidore with nice movement across for Mepham and 3 points. Not a vintage display, as I say, but I think you scratch the surface. There are some positives for Sunderland, in particular the return of Romain Mundle and Tom Watson, which means the left side of their attack now looks a lot healthier on paper. Then there's the form of Mayenda, the fact that Isidore has had a rest as well. And it's going to be an interesting next 8 weeks or so for Sunderland and how they play. I think everyone's going to have to be fairly sanguine about things if there are games that they don't win, and try not to panic too much, because the most important thing will be heading into the playoffs with everyone focused and not panicking and with positive energy rather than negative energy. Plenty of positive energy in the stands at the CBS. George Coventry with what feels like their 10th injury time winner of the last 2 weeks. 3-2 against Stoke, with lots of narrative dripping from this one, the return of Mark Robbins. But for Cov, their 9th win in 10 league games. Yeah,
as you say, Robbins has returned to Coventry. It felt like it was a nice kind of loving, like a lot of mutual respect in the grounds around Robbins. I saw a nice clip that kind of showed him at the end of the game staying behind and basically having a nice cuddle with lots of the Coventry players, which, given the manner in which they lost the game, I think is a pretty good measure of the man. If he can come back from getting back from 2-0 down to draw 2-2 and then conceding the way they did in the 97th minute, is a bit of class. The first goal here is one of the weirder goals you're going to see. It is just a long throw, but it's a long throw and then a free header from kind of 12 yards out from Victor Torp. The replays are not particularly kind on young Lewis Kumas, who just decides he's not going to track his man at all, and he's instead going to kind of gamble on the fact that he might be able to get away on the counter.
Tony Pulis watches that. Stoke conceding just a first contact header from a long throw into the corner. What's he feeling? I think he's grinding his teeth.
Yeah, I'd agree. And that was after Kumas missed a decent opportunity early on. Torp with a lovely taken goal to score 2 to around the half-hour mark. And as I said a second ago, Coventry should have been 3-0 up, or should have had a very good chance to go 3-0 up shortly afterwards, with just a baffling baffling decision. And I tried to not get involved in the debate around the ban to Liam Roberts after his very bad foul on Mateta and getting an extra three match ban off the back of the initial 3. But then I did. I think it's a strange decision. It's obviously a bad challenge. It's obviously dangerous play. The punishment for that is a red card and a ban. I don't really see why there should be an extension of 3 games to that, albeit, obviously it was a dangerous challenge, but, there was no malicious intent or anything there. Obviously this wasn't studs in Ephraim Mason-Clark's head, but it was still a case where the keeper comes absolutely flying out and is late and takes out Mason-Clark, who gets there first and gets a toe on the ball to either divert it towards goal or around the keeper. It's mad, and I can't help but feel it's, again, one of these weird ideas that because Mason-Clark got there first and got some kind of goal-bound touch on the ball, therefore whatever happens from the keeper afterwards is then seen as being irrelevant, which is just, has to be wrong. Like, it has to be
I think you're just
wrong.
I think you're overthinking this. I don't think it's that deep. I think the ref just made an absolute howler. I just think
Didn't think he touched him.
It was just a huge mistake. It was a clear penalty and it wasn't given.
Right.
And
Okay, but this is, I want to keep up my quest to punish fouls after a board is played, and this, this was a case. Even if that wasn't why he gave it. Like, I kind of feel like, I don't know, because I hate seeing the fact that sometimes the attacker is seemingly punished for being the one to get there initially. Anyway, I mean, it should have been a penalty. It wasn't. In the second half, Sam Gallagher came on, and that seemed to make all the difference. He scored both goals. The second of which was some really nice work from Avuta Berger, who, it was kind of bizarre defending from Coventry. It felt like walking football for a second as they broke, and then Berger squared it.
there seemed to be quite
Gallagher,
a few
who
instances of them
stroked it home.
Yeah, of their high line being somewhat exposed recently. I know it happened quite a few times in the first half as well. I noticed that Sideways Sammy, who's my favourite Coventry fan in terms of the content that it creates around the club, it would be completely normal for most fans to be so giddy after the run that they're on. His review of the match was pointing out that actually performances aren't necessarily matching up with the results, and if the performances don't improve, particularly defensively, it's probably not going to be 9 wins from their next 10 games, which I thought showed insane clear-headedness from a fan that should just be, jumping up and down with glee. But that's Sideways Sammy for you.
This is a very interesting, season-long example of variance, and to an extent, where for half a season, Mark Robins oversaw some pretty good overlying numbers and some bad results.
Some overlying numbers. That's an incredible new phrase. Absolutely love it. That's just the league table, mate. That's the overlying numbers.
Are just scores.
That's the league table.
Mark Robins oversaw a period of good underlying numbers and bad overlying numbers and bad results. And then Frank Lampard comes in. The underlying numbers haven't really changed much. If anything, probably from a defensive standpoint, they've got worse. And yet is overseeing good results. And it's hard, to not... this is kind of the definition of the idea that a new manager bounce doesn't exist, where if you are a manager who's unlucky enough to get sacked whilst performances are okay but results are bad, then that is a job you want to take on because you probably don't have to do too much. And that, Lampard obviously still deserves credit. And the way that they still managed to battle back in games and score late is important. Clearly, from a headed goals perspective, he's improved their output and their delivery into the box and got players in decent areas. It's all true, but it doesn't change the fact that, even though the results would suggest that Robbins was terrible and Lampard's great, the truth is that they were realistically closer together, and this is the reversal of that. The goal itself that won it was just a brilliant bit of play from Bobby Thomas, who's found in the area. When I saw he had scored, I was like, not another header in the last minute, but no, it was just a big old left foot into the bottom right hand corner, having done pretty well to manoeuvre the ball into it.
Iconic celebration as well.
Yeah, huge celebration with Lampard and the players on the touchline. It's a really significant win. I think it becomes more significant. There seems to be this idea that Coventry are now probably home and hosed in terms of the playoffs. But after Derby away on Tuesday night, which is probably relatively difficult given Derby's performance on Saturday and how big again that is for them, their next 3 games after that are Sunderland at home, Sheff United away, and Burnley at home. So 3 of the 4 best teams in the whole league, back to back to back. And they've won 5 games in a row all of those by a solitary goal. And as we said, some of those coming late. So I don't think they're home and hosed yet, I wouldn't say. I don't think the performances necessarily collate with a team that are winning as liberally as they are. But they're a very good side, and they have been a good side for a long period of time, and they'll make life difficult for their opponents going forward. Just for Stoke, you're going to feel so frustrated that they battled back so valiantly and did really well in the game from 2-0 down to get back into the game, and would have fancied their chances at that stage of going on to win it, but have again thrown away a pretty good position. And they're a team that certainly Derby are going to be looking to shoot at, and it's Derby Stoke on final day, which with Stoke away at Derby. So Stoke basically know that they need that gap to be bigger than 3, ideally, going into final day, to not make that an incredibly nervy kind of relegation playoff. Obviously, loads more can happen until then, but that is a fairly likely scenario.
Yeah, just on Cov, I sort of quipped last week that they were the flyer from the bottom half of the table making the playoffs that everyone's always looking for, but they did it so early that they make the playoffs. There's still 12 games to go at that point. And there's a semi-serious aspect of it, which is, and it's kind of follows on from what you were just discussing, is that, look, they might win 9 of their next 10 games, in which case they'd go into the playoffs having won 18 of 20, but that's probably not going to happen. No teams win 18 of 20, really, in the Championship. So there is that question of, like, at the moment, you're looking at Coventry, they're dazzling everyone, and you wouldn't want to play Coventry heading into the playoffs because of their recent form. But it'll be interesting to know how different the narrative might be or not in 2 months' time if we're doing a playoff preview. Even if Coventry win 4, draw 3, lose 3 of their last 10 games, which is what they've got less, that would be an all right points return. They would almost certainly make the playoffs with that. But would there be a sense that they're not that good or they are still amazing? I'm really interested to know how people look at them if the next 10 games aren't quite as dazzling as this 10 games. And then maybe there'll be another team that wins 7 or 8 of their last 10 that make the playoffs, and suddenly they'll be the team that have the momentum. And it's all fun and games, isn't it? West Brom established themselves in a playoff spot as well with a 1-0 win at home to QPR. Now, the goal came from a penalty in the first half, Colback on Mollenby. The ball's cut back by Fellows. Colback kind of pulls him back and kind of trips him at the same time. I've seen it described as soft, and I understand where that comes from because you don't see penalties like this very often. But I think it is a penalty. I think it's a fairly cynical tug from Colback, who's probably trying to be subtle by pulling back the shoulder and ends up getting a piece of the leg as well. But he knows he's the wrong side of Mollenby, who's running onto a cutback, and I think he knows what he's doing. So I wasn't too upset with the awarding of that penalty. Furlong was sent off for West Brom in injury time in the first half for catching Saito in the face. I haven't yet seen an angle that gives me any idea whether it was a horrible piece of violent conduct or an unfortunate connection of arm and face. So nothing really to add there. And for West Brom, I guess it's just pleasing that it didn't affect the result. They saw it out fairly well. QPR aren't really the sort of team that you think are going to be particularly well suited to breaking down a team with 10 men who are sitting behind the ball and defending a lead. And that was the case. Saito had their best chance but didn't score it. And then, for West Brom, massive to now have albeit a 2-point gap, not massive, but that there are a lot of playoff chasers, or at least we felt there were a lot of playoff chasers from Bristol City to Blackburn, Borough, Norwich, Watford, and they all tripped up. They all tripped up over the weekend. Bristol City drew 1-1 at home to Hull. João Pedro putting Hull ahead with a goal that, if you really squint, it looks a bit like when you watch compilations of peak Ronaldo Fenomeno playing for Barcelona.
Yeah.
The touch is also the spin that leads to the slotted finish. It's sensational. Genuinely from the sublime to the ridiculous, though, because a minute later, he gets sent off for one of the most ridiculous, unnecessary, mind-boggling challenges I've seen for a while. Jumping in, both feet off the ground, for just no apparent reason, and kind of shafting his team, because from that point onwards, I think it was the 16th minute, remarkable stats after the red card: 25 shots to 0, 85% to 15% possession. Hull completed 68 passes in 80 minutes of football, and Panda made some incredible saves for them. There was a penalty when Armstrong was pulled down and Mehmeti scored it, but Bristol City couldn't get a second, and that's frustrating for them. Also frustrating for Watford, who lost at home to Millwall. And not only that, they lost at home having had the lead through Matty Pollock in the first half. Really disappointing to have seen Millwall turn that around and beat them. From a Millwall point of view, standout second half display from Imaku, who's kind of him and Bangura Williams kind of filling the Remain essay void with just really exciting wing play. Setting up to Norwich for the first goal, and then Bangura laid it off for Kramer for a cross that was headed in brilliantly by Josh Coburn to win it. And I'm just left with the feeling that it's hard to predict what sort of Millwall you're going to get from match to match at the moment. And you could say the same for Watford at the moment. I think that's the reason why the two teams are likely to finish a few spots outside the playoff places, but well clear of anything more dangerous. And then, George, frustration for Middlesbrough, who, after doing quite well over the last couple of weeks, to just calm things down a little, go to Swansea and get beaten 1-0, a third clean sheet for Swans since Sheehan took caretaker charge.
This feels like a pretty impressive caretaker spell. Now, we always kind of urge caution when it comes to caretaker spells because quite often teams are caught out, and I saw it's been reported in the last few days that Swansea very much eyeing up a coach or two from the continent. So it's, even though the bookies might have Sheehan as heavy odds on Fav here, it does feel like there is a kind of big recruitment process underway for the Swansea manager job. And he was very quick to brush off any questions to him about the job. But he's, it's impressive what they're doing. And we spoke the other day about, I have no idea which podcast it was on, whether this one or DAG, our one for the subscribers. But we spoke about what is the Swansea way, and is it kind of, has it become in a way a bit of a bit of an issue for them. But it feels like Sheehan's balancing a kind of proactive, attacking, high-line, possession-based approach without it necessarily being overly possession-heavy. And that was the case here with Swansea kind of playing a high-line, stepping up, effectively letting Middlesbrough have the ball but pressing them as soon as they advance forward. And to really good effect. Borough really, who have been a good attacking side, even in recent weeks, but they haven't necessarily been have been getting the best results. They're still carrying an attacking threat, but it wasn't really the case here, especially in the first half. The goal was a brilliant strike from Eom, a player who is kind of growing as the season goes on and looks a real talent. And they managed it well in the second half, with Borough struggling to create too much by way of opportunity. I mean, it's interesting with both of these sides what they're going to do now, because the season is effectively over for both. I'd be staggered.
You're calling it for Borough.
I'd be staggered if Borough were able to, from this position now. I mean, what is it? It's 5 points. I mean, of course it's not done, right? I've done a U there and called it done too early.
Incredible gymnastics from you there, making an error and then going like, oh, I'm just, it's you. That's you normally. What am I doing? That's all you.
But it's normally you who says, you normally say to me in February, are we saying they're down now? And I'm like, oh, no. I'd be very surprised if Borough were able to. Well,
the difference between asking a question to try and get some good podcast content and you just saying it as part of your answer.
It feels like Borough are not playing well enough at the moment to bridge that gap, even if I have got some doubts about those above them. And when it felt like the club very much put out a statement around their support for Carrick a few weeks ago, but it was still very much clear that the aim was to deliver promotion this season, and they're not playing like a side at the moment who look ready to do that. So what they do will be interesting. With Swansea, I mean, it feels like the decision to part company with Luke Williams has been vindicated, not just by the results, but also the performances that have massively improved.
And George, also frustration for Norwich City, who kicked off the weekend at home to Oxford. The result was 1-1. Now, sorry to bring this up, mate, but on the betting show, you picked Norwich to win 2-0 in this game. And I remember thinking to myself, what, Norwich? Like Norwich, who even when they win, like almost always concede, because there's just something about them that's a little bit soft. Like, really? And, there was a long throw getting stabbed in at the near post by Mark Harris. And I was like, well, yeah.
Obviously. Fair play. It was a game that started with a Josh Sargent goal, as we probably expected would do. Good play down the right from Kenneth Fisher, a nice ball into him, and then a good cross finished off well. Oxford threw a bit of a surprise by playing a five at the back, which I would say worked for the most part. Like, even though Norwich had a lot of the ball, they restricted Norwich to very, very few good opportunities to score. Sargent had one goal disallowed. The goal from Oxford, the equaliser, came from a pretty rare good attack. It was it wasn't really even an attack. It was a long throw from Will Volks that Jack Stacey headed onto his own man. So even though Mark Harris would have been standing in an offside position because it didn't hit an Oxford player, he was able to spin and put it in the near post, which is, I would say, pretty significant. I think him scoring a goal for Oxford is big news in this run-in because he's been woefully low of confidence and kind of really needed that. And we saw it out pretty cosily, I thought. There was one big chance for Boris Sainz. Well, I'm pretty sure he was offside, but it wasn't given. One-on-one with Jamie Cumming, and Cumming does what he's doing a lot at the moment and made a save that probably is a difference between a defeat and a point. And it's Oxford's first point in 4 games. It would have been the first time Gary Rowett had lost 4 games in a row in the league games as manager. And it feels like a significant point, frankly, because we probably don't need that many in order to stay up. Hull, I am going to Hull on Wednesday night, which feels like a huge game. And this was certainly a performance away from home to build on, especially given Oxford's form away from home at the best teams in the league so far this season has been pretty poor. But yeah, Norwich will feel like it was, given how good they've been against the poorer sides at scoring goals consistently, it was a pretty flat performance, albeit they clearly have lots of injuries at the moment, and especially midfield are looking pretty thin.
I have been chuckling at that Gary Rowett stat all weekend.
Gary Rowett.
We're like, A, it's just quite a random stat for anyone to know or be keeping track of, that he's never lost 4 games in a row. B, it's like, I want to say it's really impressive. He's managed 500 odd games of management. It's very impressive, and clearly, there's something to this idea that Rowett is, even if he's managing a team up against it, and even if they're in poor form and struggling, manages to do so. But I also just find it quite funny that he's not immune to losing back-to-back games. They lose one, the response isn't always great. They lose the second one, the response from 2 to 3 is not always great either. He's not having an immediate impact. But once they lose that third game, Rowett is in overdrive, and the players, they know about it.
I would say that the fact that he, for the most part, manages or has managed clubs, apart from obviously Stoke and Derby prior to that, but in recent times managed clubs who are have one of the lowest budgets of the league, makes it relatively impressive that he is able. We sometimes talk about managers and say that they are unable to stop a rot, and it feels like Rowett seemingly can stop a rot. I
think that's it, and I think there's probably something about, again, might be completely swinging and missing here, but I reckon there's something about his response to a poor run, rather than going everything's fine and everything will be all right, is probably at that point where you've lost 3 in a row. He's right, I don't really care what happens in the next game as long as we don't lose it. We are, obviously the fixture fell nicely for a move to the back 5 away at Norwich, which it might not have done if you were home to Hull, for example. But I think there's probably something in that. Let's just stop the rot, grind out a performance, defend our box properly, and not ignore the fact that we're in poor form and maybe compound the issues. So well done, Gary Rowett. That's a great stat. I'm also the other thing that I find weird is I'd love to know how many other managers have never lost 4 in a row. We don't have that context. We don't know that. It could be quite normal. And also frustration for Blackburn Rovers, who lost away at Derby. They did so with their former manager, John Eustace, in the Derby dugout and getting his first win as Derby manager. Derby's first win since Boxing Day. Eustace's players giving him the win, the result that he would have been craving all week. The goals were messy as hell. First 10 minutes, Forsyth bundling home, Adams bundling home, Mactar-Gay, which is not the name Matt Target in a French accent.
Mactar-Gay, qui est un joueur au foot, qui a joué le but. Je pense qu'il est un joueur très bon. Il a un peu de... Comment?
Matt Target pulling one back for Rovers in the first half. I now will never be able to say his name without thinking about little Matt Target. And to be fair, I mean, Derby saw this out.
For those many, many people who just haven't looked at my Twitter account, have no idea what we're talking about now.
Well, it's because everyone's thinking it. Everyone's thinking it when I'm saying
Everyone knows. Yeah.
They saw it out with fewer scary moments than I probably anticipated. For Blackburn, winless in 3. They've actually only won 4 of their last 16 games. Blackburn, that clearly needs to change if they are to get back into the top 6. I'm not expecting that, but they've been a team that have zagged against expectations all season. So let's see how we go as Ishmael gets his feet under the table. So loads of playoff chasing teams stumbling, George. And last but not least, we can head down to the bottom of the table. We've just spoken about Derby. They were the only team in the bottom 7 to win. It's huge for them. Argyle did not match that at home to Sheffield Wednesday, losing 3-0, very much rolling over and having their tummies tickled by Sheffield Wednesday.
This was uncharacteristically poor from Argyle, who started the game like they came out of the blocks really quickly, had 3 shots in the first 3 minutes. JB with the best, and it felt like they were coming to play. But what happened after that was just absolutely horrendous. Ogbeta made a real mess of a ball into the box. He kind of almost tripped over it and diverted it into the goal. Callum Patterson scored the second just before half time. Like this was basically an Argyle away performance at home, which we're not used to seeing. They couldn't get near Wednesday. They couldn't create anything of note. They were just seen off relatively comfortably. And Mira Muslic in his post-match interview basically said at the first impact of something bad happening, they just completely disappeared, and that's kind of the way that it went. And if this is what we can expect from Argyle at Home Park, given 25 of their 30 points this season have come at home, then they're not going back in the oven. They're done. This is pretty terminal for them. They have to. We know they're going to have to rely for the most part on their home form for points. This was absolutely desperate for them. So a really poor performance. Wednesday pick up a lot of their points away from home, and they were true to that here. And that it's their first win in 3, having lost the 3 previous games. So a big point for them to take to Norwich on Tuesday night. But this is all about Argyle, and those back-to-back home wins against Millwall and West Brom feel like a long time ago now. And they go to Pompey next, who, as we've discussed, are not probably the team you want to be travelling to at the moment.
They are 6 points from safety, but the goal difference makes it basically 7 at this point. Luton are 5 points from safety. Derby are 4 points from safety. Then it's Cardiff and Stoke on 36 and Hull on 37. Oxford United 39. That's our bottom 7 in the Championship. And it'll be interesting to see whether we go down to the wire with the Championship relegation battle. If that is to be the case, one of, if not more than one of, Derby, Luton and Argyle are going to have to find something from somewhere. Some big games in midweek in the Championship. We'll be covering them for paid subscribers of NTT20.com on the show called Under the Lights, which is a podcast recap of the midweek fixtures across all of the EFL. That was the end of a really significant Championship weekend, and we had one in League One as well.